There's an entire generation of people who remember both rotary phones and the first iPhone launch. And psychologists can't quite figure out where to put them. They're too young to be Gen X, too old to be millennials. And here's what nobody tells you. The specific years they grew up in created a psychology that doesn't exist in any other generation alive today. If you were born between 1977 and 1985, this video is going to explain a lot of things about yourself you've never heard put into words. This video is about Xennials, the microgeneration caught between two worlds. We're going to go through what actually shaped them, why they think and behave differently than the generations on either side, and the one psychological ability they developed that almost no one else has. By the end, if you've ever felt like you don't quite fit anywhere, too young for some things, too old for others, you'll understand why. And you'll see it's not a flaw. It's the entire point. Before we get into it, drop your birth year in the comments right now. I want to see where the Xennials in the audience actually are. It'll make more sense by the end of the video. Sociologists started calling this group Xennials around 2014. Some researchers now label them a microgeneration because the window is so specific, and because what happened during that narrow slice of history created something genuinely worth examining. You spent your childhood in an analog world. Boredom was just something you sat with. You memorized phone numbers. If you missed your favorite TV show, it was gone. No recording, no streaming, no second chances. And then, right as you were moving into adulthood, the entire world went digital. Not gradually, suddenly. The timing of that shift has consequences that are still playing out. Most generations grow up entirely in one technology paradigm. Boomers in analog, Gen Z in digital. But Xennials went through both defining experiences during the exact years when you were still figuring out who you were. Your teens looked completely different from your 20s. And the gap between those two versions of your life is wider than what most generations ever experience. Think about what that actually meant in daily life. Most of your teenage years were spent passing physical notes in class, having conversations that disappeared into the air, making plans where you couldn't text "running late" or "where are you?" You just showed up and hoped your friends would be there. That required a completely different kind of trust and commitment than what exists now. Then you were in your 20s, and suddenly everyone had cell phones, Friendster, MySpace, Facebook. Before social media, most people only had 3 ways to contact someone: their home phone, their work phone, or showing up at their house. And then suddenly, you were juggling 17 different messaging apps. And you just figured it out. Here's why this matters psychologically. Research published in Nature Neuroscience shows that the prefrontal cortex, the brain region that handles adaptation and complex learning, doesn't finish maturing until around age 25. Xennials were still in this high plasticity window when the entire technological landscape was reshaped. Young enough that picking up new technology felt natural, but old enough to remember exactly what came before it. That's created what researchers describe as a kind of digital bilingualism. You can have a face-to-face conversation without checking your phone every 30 seconds. But you also don't get anxious about learning new software. You remember what it felt like to be genuinely unreachable for hours. And you're also not intimidated by technology the way older generations sometimes are. Almost no one else has that combination. It's yours. Quick question. Do you remember your home phone number from childhood? I remember mine like it was yesterday. Drop it in the comments if you still know it. I'm genuinely curious how many of you do. There's another thing about Xennials that people don't talk about. You have a different relationship with your own past than anyone younger than you. You grew up in a world where embarrassing moments faded into memory. That 7th grade haircut, that terrible breakup, that drunk night at a party when you were 19. There's no photo evidence. It just exists in the stories people tell. Stories that get softer, funnier, wiser over time. This creates a fundamentally different relationship with your own history. Your memories were allowed to evolve, to become stories, to change, shape the way human memory naturally does. You weren't trapped by documentation. Research on autobiographical memory shows that our brains are actually designed to edit the past, to keep what matters and let the rest fade. That's a feature, not a bug. When everything is permanently documented and searchable, that natural process gets interrupted in ways psychologists are still trying to understand. Xennials grew up before permanence, and they carry that experience into a world that has stopped letting anyone forget anything. But here's where it gets heavier. You entered the job market right around the 2008 financial crisis, which means a lot of Xennials experienced serious economic instability during the exact years when you were supposed to be building a career. That timing matters more than most people realize. Research on economic hardship shows that financial trauma during this life stage, your late 20s to early 30s, can leave lasting psychological effects. People who experience job loss or financial instability during these years often carry those experiences forward even after their situations improve. It reshapes how you think about money, security, risk in ways that don't fully go away. So you have this generation that learned to adapt to massive technological change, but also got economically burned right when you were trying to build stability. You can navigate change because you had to. But there's often an underlying current running through your decisions that goes something like, what if it all falls apart again? Nobody really talks about that combination, but if it sounds familiar, that's exactly where it comes from. If I just described something you've never seen written down before, that's what this channel is for. I break down this kind of psychology every week. Subscribe if you want more of it. It genuinely helps. Here's what makes Xennials genuinely unusual. You have the self-reliance and skepticism of Gen X, because you grew up before helicopter parenting became standard. Your parents probably didn't know where you were for hours at a time. And that was normal. You learned to solve problems on your own, to entertain yourself, to handle boredom and frustration without immediate adult intervention. But you also hit adulthood in the early days of the internet, when technology was still believed to be the thing that would connect everyone and solve everything, before we all realized it might be complicating more than it was fixing. That combination created a specific psychological signature: independent but cooperative, doubtful but hopeful, digital but analog, nostalgic but not stuck in the past, modern but aware of what was lost. What defines Xennials is the ability to hold those contradictions without it feeling strange. You remember the before and the after, which means you can see what was gained and what was lost, without idealizing either side. You genuinely appreciate modern conveniences, But unlike younger generations, you still recognize what was quietly given up. You lost the ability to be truly alone with your thoughts without effort. You lost the patience that comes from waiting. You lost a certain quality of presence that existed when there wasn't always something else competing for attention. But you gained connection, information, possibilities your younger self couldn't have imagined. Here's the part that actually matters. If you're a Xennial, you've probably spent your whole life feeling like you don't quite fit anywhere. Too young for some things, too old for others. Caught between two worlds that both claim you're on the wrong side. That's not a flaw. That's the defining feature of your experience. And in a world that keeps changing faster than anyone can predict, having already lived through one complete transition might be the most valuable thing you could have learned. You're proof that the environment you were raised in doesn't have to be the one you live in forever. You adapted without losing yourself. That's the Xennial skill. Not the nostalgia, not the tech fluency. The ability to change completely and still be you at the end of it. Most people never get to find out whether they could do that. You already did. Now I want to hear from you. What's the one thing from the analog world that you genuinely miss? Not the Instagram nostalgia version, the actual thing. Mine is the silence. Tell me yours in the comments. I read them all. The Xennial experience matters. Not because this microgeneration is special in some superior way, but because you lived through a specific moment in history that taught you something the rest of the world is still trying to figure out. How to adapt without losing yourself in the process. That's a skill the next decade is going to demand from everyone. You've just been practicing it longer. If this made sense of something you've felt for years, but never had words for, that's exactly why this channel exists. Subscribe, and I'll see you here every week for more deep dives like this one. And I've got a video queued up next that I think is going to land even harder for you. It's about why some people think completely differently than the people around them, and why that might be their biggest hidden advantage. It's right there. Click it. I'll see you in the next one.